We unmuted. Okay, go ahead and call the meeting to order. With all who wish, join me in the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Only agenda adjustment I know of is to drop the IKF off the policy list. So I would move, maybe just not do it when I get there, but may as well make the agenda clean. I would move to drop that from the agenda. Is there a second?
A second.
Any other agenda adjustments? Go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Carries 4-0. Make a motion to consider the minutes from September 23rd as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or corrections? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes? Carries 4-0. Make a motion to approve warrants 7 and 8, payroll warrants 7 and 8, bond 25. 25 year, the bond of year 25 warrants number 2 and 3, capital improvement 23, main purse for September, insurance for September. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Motion carries 4-0. The floor is now open for public comment. Would anybody like to make a public comment? If you're on Zoom, go ahead and unmute. Not seeing anybody, we'll go ahead and move on. Acknowledgements, Jake?
Nothing at this time. Thank you, guys.
I don't think I have anything. No?
Nothing at this time.
Mark?
Nothing for me, thank you.
I know you have a report coming up, so probably nothing for now, Sophia.
Yeah.
Okay. And Meredith?
Yes, I'm, regrettably, he's not here. I wanted to recognize Connor, one of our student board reps. Connor, we learned is the president of the National, Student Board Member Executive Council. So you may recall that, sometimes our board reps have attended that, conference in the summer and have joined those groups. And Connor was elected the president of the executive board for this year. So congrats to Connor. We're being well represented.
Great. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to reports. Carrie.
Good evening, everyone. I see that we have a lot of reports in store for us this evening, so I'll try to be pretty succinct. I usually am, but I'll highlight three things pretty quickly. The first one is a shout out for the staff and the students who have been focused on getting those NOEA assessments completed. They've been working hard. Last week was when we launched the testing, and we're making our way through the makeups this week, and I believe we are very close to done. So everyone's been putting in a lot of hard work on that. So thank you very much. The other thing I would really just want to highlight on for a second was the fantastic in-service we had back on October 10th. It was, I must say, attendance for ASA staff was really fantastic on this day. I think it was the smallest number of absences we've had since I've been here. So it was nice to see everyone there and really engaged in the work they were doing. I was working with the Strand 3 literacy group, and the feedback on that, everyone really was engaged, and they enjoyed having that time to work together and dig deeper into those new resources in the work that they were doing. And then the biggest thing I just want to take a second and comment on, and I don't know if I see her on the screen yet, so I'll talk about her while she's not here. But a shout out to Ms. West, who is our leader of all things habits of mind. She's really been driving that train, and this year she was really excited to introduce some assemblies to celebrate students who are really working hard to exemplify the different habits of minds that we're teaching and learning about. And so we kicked off our first assembly back at the end of September, and we're getting ready for our second one this week. And this will be the first one that we've opened up for parents to come and join us. So we're excited to have some families in the building. We have some fifth graders from Jen Marakis's class who have put together some skits for us about the habits of mind that we're celebrating. So it's really an exciting time, and Maddie deserves the shout out for sure. So I'm glad she's not here because she wouldn't like it very much. And I'll end there for now. So thank you.
Great, thanks. Sounds exciting. Any questions or comments? Okay, I know Richard is not able to be here, so I imagine, having looked, I imagine we have his report in the folder.
Yeah, his report's in the folder. If you have any questions, we can try to answer.
We'll go ahead and move on to the high school. Sam.
Hey, everybody. So I just want to kind of echo what Carrie started off with. It's been a really exciting beginning to our school year. Right now, some of the most exciting pieces are that we have had our homecoming, which even though unfortunately we weren't able to have our bonfire, which I know the kids were pretty bummed about because just, you know, Mother Nature hasn't been working in our favor. There was a lot of great involvement with the kids. The pep rally, there was a recognized absence of the cell phones, leading to a positive involvement and engagement from all of our students and staff during the pep rally, which was really nice and very felt. And it was just a very fun week full of like dressing up and all the fun, like donuts and different little games throughout the week. So, and as well as encouraging on and supporting our athletes, which at this time of year, it's really exciting. Beginning next week is playoff season. And so it's really exciting in high school world, especially in fall sports, as we really gather together to support all of our teams that have been doing very well, including even a lot of the senior nights have occurred with soccer. Boys soccer was tonight and football's coming up on Friday. So really exciting time in the athletic world. And, just a specific shout out to Coach Hamill, who since our last boarding meeting did get his 100th goal as a coach at Orono High School. So congratulations to the boys soccer team and Coach Hamill. But as far as family collaborations, we at the high school shifted a few things this year, which really was felt as far as really having presence from the students and their families in our school, and being able to see, our teachers in person, being able to see our space, and interact with them within the classroom. And those two events were our open house, which this year we held later. We often have held it the night right after the first day of school for ninth graders. We moved it till the kind of the middle of September, was it September 16th, and really tried to advertise that it was for all students of all grade levels, and really to come and bring their families and show around the school, meet the teachers, and really just see what our space is. But we also were able to include an informational session for Watershed, which brought quite a few families to that event in the OPAC, and a senior parent evening planning for the upcoming end of year festivities that is always very fun and exciting, but is a lot to plan for senior parents. So we had a lot of people here on that evening, which really felt very, very good for us. As well as the parent teacher conferences this year were all in person. And most of our staff were pretty booked, which is also new for us at the high school level. Oftentimes our parent teacher conferences aren't as well attended, but this year they were, and there was activity, there was people walking around, interacting, and again, getting to see our space and meet the teachers. So thank you to everybody who it came to those events and made those such a huge success. We too have been working on our fall assessments. I'm proud to say that we switched up our schedule a bit, using Watershed time and also spacing out for grade 10 when they completed the assessments, and then having a totally separate day that we had for PSAT senior seminar, some Watershed time, and some pretty valuable time for grade 10 to spend with their advisors. This resulted for us a lot of positive feedback from staff, from the kids, and we had not a single person asked to have their student opt out of the testing. We have one student that is currently enrolled in 10th grade that hasn't completed, but other than that, huge shout out to Mr. Mansfield, who has helped greatly in ensuring that we get all the makeup exams completed. And then otherwise, the other things are clubs continue to work hard to make our environment a safe and learning environment for all. And so the Start with Hello Week that our ambassadors, along with our Save Promise Club, put together was a huge success. And alongside that, I have completed doing the Say Something anonymous tip line trainings to all the students. And I will say, as I will show in my State of the School presentation next month, we've receiving a lot of tips. So it is sure that kids know that we're here, and that's a way in which they can access us if they need some help. So just a lot to be proud of, a lot of more engagement in our schools with our families, and we really truly appreciate it. And good luck to our fall sports teams as they approach competition.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments?
I had a couple of questions. It sounded like you were gonna talk more about the tips later, is that what you said?
Next month in the data presentation.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then I maybe we've asked this, but I'm just curious to sort of keep tabs, and you mentioned the Watershed a few times. I'm just wondering how that's going with this first.
That'll also be in my State of the School next
Okay.
month.
Well, then I'll just.
I really
Yeah,
am
we
working
plan
hard,
that.
Noah, to hopefully answer a lot of the questions I figure you guys have, rightfully so, within that State of the School. So I'm really looking forward to doing that with you next month.
Sounds good, thanks.
Anything else? Go ahead and move on to director reports. Lisa?
Good evening. Nice to see you folks in person and not be distracted by my dog's tail in the camera view. I put together a little information as far as special education. We've had referrals on the daily since the beginning of school. We were still working on some of the referrals from last spring, which those are finally coming to an end. We currently have 14 students in referral. I spoke to a mom today. They're moving to the area. Another student who requires special education, so it's constantly a rotating number. Looking at the total number of our students receiving services, I had 239. Out of that, 183 were Orono residents and 56 were tuition residents. And I have it broken down by disability in my report for you to see. For multi-language learners, Marley and Eric worked really hard in putting together some data for you folks. I think you're gonna find it very interesting to see the changes that we've experienced over the last few years. So we'll get to that a little bit later. The nursing area, we had a very successful flu clinic last week. I guess there were 100 participants. Not too many tears were shed, so it was pretty successful. We have had some changes as far as reporting. There's a new platform for school nurses to report immunization status. And because again, this is a new platform that is put out by the DOE in conjunction with the CDC, we're having a bit of difficulty. All schools are having a bit of difficulty accessing and updating that. So that's something that we're working on. They've extended the time for us to submit all of our information into February of next year, because of all these, mishaps that are happening with a new platform. But hopefully we'll get that in by the time it needs to be in. Any questions from my end?
Thank you. Any questions?
I don't know if it's a question for you or the nurse. I mean, this raised the question about the nursing or the in-house health thing. That's a separate. We had talked about doing the.
Oh, the school-based health center?
Yeah, is that like,
Well, the main provider, PCHC, that's been doing that in the area, told us we're at capacity, we can't get enough providers. I could circle back, I haven't talked to them since sometime last school year, just to see if they're in a different place.
yeah, it's a question.
Yeah, might be worth checking too. I'll put that on the list.
And I got a shot in the food, in the food clinic here too, so. It works.
Good. Just one additional note, that I forgot to put on here, but, we're pretty much at capacity as far as meeting social work needs. We have talked with Acadia about potentially having an intern or another person from Acadia who could, see students through the medical model and through insurance to come support our students. So, because again, we've got kids on a waiting list, so we're hoping to provide some more resources soon.
Great. Thank you, Susan.
Good evening. Wanted to let you know that our new Title I funded program to support students that are struggling somewhat with literacy is up and going at the Orono Middle School. We call it Literacy Club, and Christy West and Amanda Palmer have done a great job getting that started. We're currently serving 18 kids and their parents have been communicated with. We have information on our website about the Title I program. And there's been a few growing pains, particularly around scheduling space, but staff have been really good about figuring out what's going on and working together to make it work. So I'm excited about that. The Family Welcoming Committee is being co-chaired with Erin Ellis this year. She's helping me keep things moving along, which is great. We have our first or second-ish meeting on November 12th. We've reached back out to folks who were on that welcoming committee last year, as well as the folks who had expressed interest in being family ambassadors to get things continue to move along. If you have something you think the Family Welcoming Committee should tackle this year, please let us know and we'll see what we can do. We'll continue with newsletter blurbs each month, and our end of October newsletter blurb will be about the school board. We thought with the board election coming up, maybe now is a good time just to let people know who's on the board, what the board does, and sort of the process for that. So I don't want that to surprise you as board members as that comes out in newsletters like Monday. So. And then another big piece of my report is the new norms for NWA, and that we'll do as a presentation or discussion later in the agenda. But as Ms. Runco said, the testing has gone very well this year, particularly in terms of the percent of students that have completed testing right now, from kindergarten all the way up to grade 10.
Has the percentage of students who are opting out, has that changed or up or down?
Definitely down at the high school. I think somewhat down at OMS, and it has always been down at ASA. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments?
Just what is that? ballpark order of magnitude off that?
I will have an exact figure for you at our data workshop, but it is above 95%.
Our target for participation, according to the federal guidelines, they're hoping we'll get to is 95%. And there have been times at the high school where we have not made that, mainly because of opt-outs.
Yeah.
And some of that was the way we were scheduling it. Don't you think?
I do. think
Yeah.
so. And that, some of it, I heard a couple kids say, oh, I wish I had my cell phone so I could text my parents and, and they can excuse me, but so that had that unintended consequence, whether you consider that positive or negative, I don't know, but that I did hear a couple high school kids mention that.
I mean, national standards aside, it's a non-representative sample who opt out, so just in terms of statistics for steering the district, I think it's important to get participation as high as we can. It sounds like there's been good work on that, so thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we move on to the student report. You're going solo tonight, huh?
Yeah. So for school culture, yonder pouches at the high school, they're being checked. Well, they're doing checks throughout the day. And picture day was on October 16th, and extracurricular checks were last Friday, October 17th, and the OMS has their mock election on the 28th. And it was mentioned earlier, but the annual flu shot clinic was last Friday. And something interesting that I found in the OMS newsletter was that international students visited Miss Bishop's class on October 16th, and they were UMaine international students. For academics, extracurricular checks were on Friday. National Honor Society applications were due October 14th, and quarter one ends on the 31st. And NUIA makeup tests at OMS are through October 24th. And for activities, it was also mentioned, but senior ceremonies were last week and this week for high school sports, and teams will be entering their playoffs and championship season. And shout out to OHS girls cross country who won PVCs, and the boys got runners up. And OHS boys soccer is still first in Class C, and the girls are sixth as of now. And they have their final games this week, and they'll enter playoffs next week. And then volleyball recently won a game against Lee Academy, and they had a home game against Jonesport Beals last Tuesday. And football won its homecoming game against Trabe Academy, and they play Bucksport on Friday, and that's another senior ceremony. And the field hockey team recently had a game against Old Town and dressed in purple to support a student from Old Town High School who was diagnosed with cancer. And RSU 34 acknowledged this and was super grateful for Orono's support. And there are no student concerns at this time.
Great, thank you, and thank you for bringing the OMS news up to us too. Superintendent report.
I think Carrie mentioned the recent in-service day, but I just wanted to underscore that it was really a great day of learning and great participation across staff. We really moved some important work forward around our strategic plan. We kicked off our work in the strands focused on student engagement and student resilience. But we also had a third strand working on the K-5 literacy, which Carrie talked about was really successful at ASA. We also had some other things happening in other parts of the day. We did the piece on emergency response with the ASA staff because they were the last staff to need to have that update. We had some tech offerings, some well-being offerings. So it was a really well-utilized day. And as Carrie said was true of ASA, was true of the district, the best staff attendance we've had at a workshop day and probably since pre-COVID. So that was really encouraging. Some things keeping us busy right now are our SREF applications. We had hoped to be able to bring those to you tonight, but they're just not ready. We're going back and forth with the architects just to refine the applications. The board does have to approve those. So we need to talk about a special meeting for next week just to do a quick approval. We can talk about that later in the meeting when we get to kind of the next meeting segment of the agenda. But as a reminder, we're putting together projects for the OHS bathrooms in the two-story wing to redo those to kind of more open concept, but single stall style bathrooms that offer ADA and safety enhancements. And really all students prefer a single stall design these days. The single stall bathrooms we have in our schools are the most popular bathrooms, on our campuses. So that's in that design, much like we did in the one across from the cafeteria. And then OMS is, our idea was to have the vestibule, a secure vestibule entry at the middle school like the other two schools have. But Haley Ward had a great idea of how to also integrate an ADA compliant entrance at the front of the middle school, which we're really excited about. And we think it will also really strengthen that application. So they're working on finalizing those two. In addition, we have 2 indoor air quality applications, one for the two-story wing at the high school. That's the oldest HVAC system now in the district. It's original back to when it was that wing was built back in the early 80s. And is one of the most challenging areas of the school for climate control, and for during COVID, it was one of the most challenging areas to really have the kind of air exchanges we were looking to have and filtration we were looking to have. We've also asked Haley Ward to put together a project for the second story of the middle school to add some cooling to those rooms, because the second floors of that building and this building are the most uncomfortable spaces when we have really warm temperatures. So those are the applications they're putting together for us. And so, we'll talk later in the meeting about timing for next week. Wednesday would probably be the safest day. I would rather not do it on Thursday, just in case there's any issue we need to clean up. Tuesday might be pushing a little. Wednesday, it's probably ideal next week for just the timing of when I think we can get them and giving us a little bit of wiggle room on the other side. Another thing that's been keeping us busy lately is we're working to implement our new Power School add-on for attendance intervention that's going to give us more tools to send notifications to families when attendance is getting to be, different notifications. We have notifications where attendance reaches a certain threshold of absences to say, hey, just, want to remind you of, these are absences. It's getting to be a concerning level, and call the school. Let's talk about it if we need to, help in any way. And then we also have positive attendance postcards that'll go out to say, great job on attendance. You've been doing a good job lately, to encourage attendance, positive attendance. And then we'll also use this to automate our chronic absence letters, rather than it relying on, the administrator to get to it. And it sometimes is, a little bit delayed. We do them, administrators usually do them like one time a month, but they might have hit the chronic attendance earlier in the month. And with this automated system, it would be more like just in time kind of notification to hopefully intervene before it gets worse. But we were just in some training today. There are a lot more capabilities that we can do in addition to these 3 automated kind of notifications that will do. So it's going to be hopefully a great tool for us to be able to make some headway with attendance that, we were all concerned about when we began looking at that data. And finally, a bit of good news, we have made an offer to a new candidate for the payroll HR specialist opening, and are just waiting on CHRC approval. So once that's approved, we'll be ready to move forward with that candidate. So that's all for my report tonight, unless you have any questions about those topics or other items.
Questions or comments?
No.
I wrote down some questions. One question, so on the bathroom, so that single stall, that's like, is that a whole room, that's the door that you go in and that's the only door? What is it?
No, it's more like, so right now we have in that space, we have, you know, a door into the boys' bathroom, a door into the girls' bathroom. They're right side by side, and then they're separated by a custodial closet. So what we're gonna do is take out all of those exterior walls, take out the interior wall separating the two, and it'll just be one big open space. But on the exterior walls, all the way around, we'll have built-in, you know, drywalled little rooms that'll have bathrooms with floor to ceiling doors and walls.
Okay.
And then in the center, there'll be a sink bank. And then in the back, they're gonna actually put the custodial closet kind of in the back of that space.
All like all gender.
It'll be kind of a U shape of bathrooms
And they'll
that,
all be like.
and you walk by it and you can look over and see all the doors. And look and see the sinks as you walk by in the hallway.
Yeah. I'm
So
just,
there's-
yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like, feel, there's controversy around bathrooms and just seeing if
Yeah.
this sort of can satisfy all the.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues that two major issues, really three. One is ADA access.
Yeah,
The door width to those bathrooms don't actually meet ADA.
sure.
They're better for ADA access than are the ones across from the cafeteria that you actually have to climb steps to get into. So this will really open that up and have two really nice size ADA bathrooms in that space, along with just more standard size ones. The second issue is just safety. Bathrooms are known as a place where students congregate, and sometimes they're there to go to the bathroom and sometimes they're not. And this will help reduce kind of get-togethers where things can happen that are not positive. When we did, some of our surveying of students, bathrooms were one of the places on campus that students felt the most unsafe. And so it can be an intimidating place sometimes for students. This open concept really reduces that potential. And closed door design stalls really help the safety sensors to work more effectively that we have begun implementing, but in more of a traditional bathroom, they don't really work as effectively. And then finally, just gender inclusivity, because, we have more at the high school, but we have few single stall bathrooms, and they're very popular for everyone. The bathrooms at the middle school that we built in that are single stall with the central office project are the most popular bathrooms in the entire middle school because people just like that privacy, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think just students prefer bathrooms like that. I think people in general prefer more privacy like that than their traditional stalls that are bathrooms.
So if I'm envisioning this correctly, there is no door going into the bathroom, so you can see the sink area.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an alcove with a ton of private bathrooms with the toilets, and the sink is in the middle of a public space.
Related question, so just on construction-y stuff, did we get anywhere with the water fountain and Asa?
Yes, so the water fountain has been installed. It's just outside the cafeteria. There was a problem getting it inside the cafeteria with the access to water and wall space near water. So it's just outside the door. So if students need it, they can just go right outside. It's a bottle filling station. So it's there, and then they're working on the other one up kind of near the kindergarten office.
So I guess that does present a little hurdle for students using water or getting water, and I get, because it's not right there in the space.
No, it's not.
And students don't, like, I know my child reported recently that they couldn't get water, they're out of milk or something.
It's not active yet. So once it's active, they'll talk to students
And
about
they'll
the
let them-
procedure.
If they can go out when.
Correct.
Okay, great, thanks. And one other question I had on construction too, like the driveway, Goodrich, right? We made it nice and smooth. And it feels like a raceway to me right now. Have we thought more about speed bumps or anything?
Well, we were actually just talking about this in another meeting, and we're going to look into some signage that will just slow people down for now without doing a hump. We might end up doing humps. We don't have that in the budget this year. So we were going to start with some signage.
I feel,
Yeah.
I walk up that every day and it's like.
You feel like
they're zooming up and
Yeah.
down like it's a Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that might be a place to put, we just wanna think about the buses but I don't think it would affect the buses at all.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if they're treating it, a lot of them are treating it as two-way now too, and I don't know if that's.
Well, it's not supposed to be two-way, but sometimes staff does go two-way for needs, but it doesn't sound like that's what's happening.
Something to just keep on the radar there.
Yeah.
One other question, sorry, I have a lot of questions. Anything, the attendance at the in-service, you said it sounded like it was super high, right?
Yeah.
This raises the question of the reason we have in-service days on Wednesdays is because attendance doesn't work on Fridays, but this is a Friday. So how is it that we were able to boost attendance? It was a Friday in-service day, right?
Well, we don't have early releases
Right.
typically on Fridays.
So is it, you're saying that, yeah, so I guess that's sort of my question, like.
Yeah, I don't really have a good answer for you. I think we've raised some awareness with staff about some concerning attendance trends, but I don't really have a good answer as to why there was such a big difference this in-service day,
So-
because the day wasn't structured too different. I mean, we were starting something new with the strand work.
I guess that's sort of my question. I do you usually have, I mean, like we worked in the strategic plan to set up a new thing and have teachers sign up for things to work on. I don't know how it usually works. Maybe that's how it usually works, but was there more sense of purpose coming into it that brought them there, or like?
Again, I really don't know the answer
So I guess
to your
that's sort
question.
of my question, like
Yeah.
if we can find out what's working, because ultimately maybe you can go back to Fridays or something for like, if we start to find better ways to keep teachers there than just making it on a Wednesday, I mean.
Yeah, I think I think we have a small sample size.
Yeah, sure.
Right now.
But
So I don't know the answer to your question. I think early release days in general would be more prone to absences
Sure.
than.
Teachers don't have to file a personal day to be absent for an early release, unlike full day PD. I mean, Susan's being modest, but I think the PD concept is really connecting. I'm guessing connecting for teachers that, they can see the connection between the strategic plan and the themes of the PD and, and it's not being chopped up quite as much thematically into the smaller pieces. And so I do think Susan gets some credit for the vision that's perhaps a little more compelling for teachers too.
I do know for ASA, probably two topics on that day that were really probably felt very impactful for them to want to prioritize, being able to be there if they had considered something else was, the literacy time was really, I think, highly needed and valued as they're implementing this new curriculum. And then the Alice emergency response training, they heard about it from us, from other doing it around the district and other places. And I think they were really curious and eager to hear about it and know about it. So I know for ASA, those were two pieces that probably felt important to be a part of. I think with the strand work, really the proof will be in the next session if they are really, wanting to come back and continue the work. So
all right, great.
I don't really have a great explanation.
Great. I have one last question for Sophia, actually. You mentioned the cell phone like checks. I'm just curious, was that a positive, or how's cell phones going? Like, does it still feel good and the checks were fine and
Yeah, I'd say those checks were fine. I mean, if you're doing everything as you should be doing, you shouldn't be concerned. I think the biggest thing is that some people do leave their phones in their car, or they don't bring them, and you have to be put on a list for that. And so I actually need to tell my parents to put me on that list because I have a college class, so I leave midway through the day every other day. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of the only thing that you kind of have to do, but I think that everybody's still respecting the yonder pouches.
Good.
Sorry to ask too many questions.
No,
Good,
good.
good questions.
Okay, so we're on to the MLL presentation update.
Yeah, so I'll share. Do you want me to share?
I was wondering if I could
Absolutely.
request to do those slides since I've got it all fiddly and scheduled with introductions. So I don't talk too quickly because if Lisa can attest, once I get rambling, I will keep
You
going.
got it?
Okay.
Okay. See if you can share now. Should just approve for the class.
Just super quickly, there was my other Google Chrome tab, so I don't actually share any identifying information. That seems like a really good idea.
I know, I always have to think about that too when I'm pulling up a. Duplicates.
No, if I allowed it. In the system there.
So I'll just start by saying at some point in the last year or so, we were talking about topics the board might like to have more information on, and this was one of them, our MLL program. And so I want to thank Eric, Marley, Lisa's the supporting cast, just kind of, supports their work.
Stage crew, on the stage. crew.
Okay, for coming tonight to just update us on the program, and I'll turn it over to you all.
On that note, I would also like to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit more about our program. As you very well know, in the last year, things have absolutely exploded in the MLO world. But first, I just wanted to talk a little bit about who we actually are. So my name is Eric Blacksmith. I use he, they pronouns, and I am the multilingual program coordinator and the grades 6 through 12 MLL educator. With me today, I have.
I'm Marley Collins Campbell. I work with pre-K to 5 at the elementary level for our multilingual population.
So before we get too far into it, I do just want to let you know what we're talking about today. So I figured you'd have some questions about how identification and assessment works, what we actually do when we're working with students, what our overall enrollment data looks like, and then just some successes and some challenges that we've been seeing so far in the last year and month and a half of this school year. So one thing that I did want to just bring up is that all of the identification, assessment, and placement procedures, in addition to the programming models that we have here at the district, come from our LAU plan, which was last updated in 2021. We are looking to put together a team to update that because the state recommends that that gets updated every 4 to 5 years, just as policy and best practice recommendations change. So that document provides our legal foundation for the effective education of multilingual learners. So when we start with getting identification, we have to start with a language use survey or referral. So for those of you who have enrolled a child in school in Maine, there's always a question at the end that's asking, what language does your child speak at home? What do they use on the daily? And what was the first language that they spoke? If they speak English, they're done. We're not even gonna look past that question to see if they need to be identified. But if they speak English and another language, or they only speak another language, then that makes them eligible for identification and screening. So when we find a student is eligible for screening, we have to notify the families by letter or telephone in a language that they are comfortable using, that their student will be receiving a proficiency screening. Because at the start of the year, we have a bit more leeway. We have 30 school days to get that done. But at any other point in the year, it's 10 days from enrollment and when they start. So for that screening, they have to be screened by a certified and trained professional. And there are 4 different types of screening. It gets really tricky. So if they're in pre-K, we use something called the pre-LAS. If it's the first semester of kindergarten, they're only taking an oral screener. So that's just looking for listening and speaking. If they're second semester kindergarten or first semester first grade, they take the WIDA kindergarten screener, which will be looking at reading, listening, writing, and speaking at the kindergarten level. Once you hit second semester or spring of first grade and every other grade, they're gonna take the regular WIDA screener online. And this just means that they'll be using a computer instead of reading a book with the screener for the administrator and answering questions based off that. Finally, we have to actually score that test to figure out whether they're gonna go. So once that's scored, we reach out to the guardians to be like, hey, your student's eligible or they're not eligible. And there are 2 tiers of eligibility within the district. We have intensive English, which means they get a score of 1.0 to 2.9, academic English, which is a score of 3.0 to 4.4, or on the pre-LAS, they get over 75, or on the WIDA, if they get over 4.5, they are considered proficient in English. And I know that these scores mean absolutely nothing to you right now, which is why I wanted to go into program delivery models. So we have the 4 main models of intensive English, academic English, monitor status, and service refusal. Our first one is intensive English, and that's 1.0 to 2.9. So for this, think newcomers, so people who have minimal to zero exposure to the English language. When they're qualified for this, we're supposed to see them for 2 periods a day. And that's been tricky. There's been a lot of conversations on like, what does a period mean, especially at the elementary school where it's not as regimented as the high school or middle school. And the state of Maine defines that as the usual amount of time that's dedicated to another content area such as ELA, math, social studies, science, or so on. When they're in intensive English, we're really looking at those core foundational literacy skills and oral language skills. So we're looking at the social piece. Can they ask what they want? Can they communicate their desires if they need help? And getting them ready to start thriving in that academic context. And they also take the access test. So Marley, what does it look like for you to work with an intensive English student?
Okay, so a beginner level, so say I'm working on a reading skill, so say I say, what do you notice in this picture? A level 1, a beginner would say ball, cat. And then like a student that has like a 2.0, for example, that's like kind of intermediate level, they might say dog and cat, and then it goes up from there for more complete sentences for the higher levels of English proficiency.
And a lot of this looks the same at the middle school and high school level. You're really starting with that 1 to 2 to 3 word responses that might be describing what it is, but generally is very small. After they get a 3.0 on the access test or on that screener, they're considered academic English students, which means we only need to see them for once a day or 1 period. And we're really looking more at the academic language. We're figuring out what advanced language structures they need, and then we're still preparing them for that access test. So at the middle school and high school, this looks like explaining to students when you're reading directions in a class, you're going to see some of these brick words, which are mortar words, which you see across different subject areas like identify, explain, summarize, and then really helping them understand the brick words, which are specialized for each area. Like you wouldn't expect a student to know what photosynthesis is for a social studies class, or what a rebellion is if they're in science. So how does this look for you at the elementary level with academic English students?
So for my level 3s and 4s, like with the higher language proficiency levels, they might, like the social English, but they might need help with their academic English. So say that we're learning about the main idea of a story. So I expect my students to speak in complete sentences. The main idea of the story is blank because, and being able to explain why, coming up with like backing it up with key details from the text, previewing that vocabulary. So going over what that word means, being able to use it in complete sentences. Sometimes I do a picture dictionary where we talk about what this word means. I have them draw a picture representing that and then using it in a sentence and then like sharing it with the classmate.
The last 2 models are much more straightforward than these 2. A monitor student is a student who has achieved 4.5 or higher, which is the score that shows they are proficient enough in the English language to not require additional services. So we don't see them every day. In fact, we very rarely see them at all unless it's in the hall and we're just chit-chatting. But this is checking with the teachers to be like, hey, like how are they doing? Are you noticing like any concerns, or is there like a gap in their language? And if there is a gap, then we can rescreen them to see if they have to come back into the program. But we track this for 2 years for the intervention to see if they need to come back in, and then for 4 years for state purposes, as Susan can attest, because whenever NUIA comes around, it's like, hey, like, is this student a exit year 3 or exit year 4? So before last year, we didn't track that until Sue was like, I need this. So now we track it for 4 years for the state. And the last piece is service refusal. This is very, very rare. I've only seen it happen 2 times in the last 6 years of data that I compiled, and this requires guardian consent. And essentially what this means is the parent's like, nope, I don't want my student receiving these additional services. They're not going to be pulled out of class. They're not going to have like a dedicated class for English. They're not doing it. But they still are, because the state requires that they take the annual access test. And that's just a more in-depth proficiency test. And they have to keep doing that every year until they get that 4.5 or above without our help or with, and that's up to the guardian. I've thrown a lot of policy at you. Figured that you might prefer the numbers, so I'm going to hand it over to Marley for the next couple slides.
Our enrollment data. So this chart goes from right to left. So this shows the students, the four identifications. And as you can see, from 2018 to 2019, we had an increase from students needing only like 1 service per day, and then students coming into district who need more of an intensive English class. So that's 2 classes per day if they score 2.9 or below. And we have seen that increase, especially at the elementary level. This shows our active members for ASA, OHS, and OMS. And as you can see, our numbers have increasingly has gone up. It doesn't show the monitoring or service refusal because they don't receive direct instruction from us.
So this next piece is just talking about program delivery numbers per school, because we've got the intensive and academic English. So for ASA, we have a total of 21 active MLLs, and of those 21, 12 receive intensive English instruction and 9 receive academic. At the middle school, I have 5 students. 1 student is intensive and 4 are academic, but then at the high school, I have 9 students. 8 of those 9 students are considered intensive English students, and only 1 of them is at the point where they're receiving the academic English instruction. So the next thing is potential students. This is all students who have indicated that they speak an additional language at home, be it German, French, Spanish, Penobscot, Bengali, whatever they speak. If they've indicated it, they're considered a potential student. So looking at 2023 to 2024, we only had 13 students across the entire year who were eligible or potential students. Of those, 8 were found ineligible and 5 were found eligible. We had a complete total swap last year. In the first semester alone, Marley and I screened a total of 30 students. Of those 30, 21 qualified and 9 did not. That is a very large number, because that's more than we had in the program before the year started. The second semester, we had slowed down a little bit to only 9 students, but all 9 of those students qualified for services. So we ended the year with 39 total kids screened and 30 new ones. This year, we've only had 18 students so far, and of those 18, we've screened 13 of them, 7 have qualified, 5 have not, and we're only in October. So our last piece is just talking about active languages in the district.
This shows our all the languages that we serve our students in our district. The biggest are Arabic, Chinese, and Spanish, with the smaller languages being Nepali, Bengali, Yubra, Filipino, and Italian, and Thai.
And of those 13 languages, RSU is providing interpretation and translation services for families in conjunction with Green Linguistics for Arabic, Spanish, Chinese, Thai, and Nepali. So the last piece, the fun piece, in my opinion, is successes and challenges. So for this, Marley and I are going to swap off. She's going to be the good cop and get to talk about the fun things. with bad cop and be like, these are our challenges.
Okay, so for our successes, we expanded the program to having two of us, two MLL teachers, and serving 45 students.
Thank you for the approval of a second teacher, yes, here, by the way. I'm really enjoying working with Marlene. She's just been an absolute godsend for the elementary school down the hill. One of our challenges, though, which I hate to say this, is we still don't have enough time or staff to meet our students as our lab plan dictates. We're supposed to see our intensive education or intensive English students twice a day, but we're only seeing them once a day because of how many students we have across the board. So our academic English kids are being seen every other day. And while that is still working, it's a little bit harder to keep track of their progress because we don't just have as much time to work with them as we could.
Another success is collaborating with teachers and families to meet students' needs. I know that I have already started meetings with my MLL families, and a lot of those families have come in to have those meetings instead of over a phone conversation. So it's really great to collaborate with the classroom teachers to see what the students need as far as language goes, and then like coming up with language goals and seeing what the parents are saying and seeing what their limitations are and coming up with goals to meet the needs of all the students.
The tricky thing about communicating with the families, though, is the district doesn't have what's called a language access plan, which is just a document that details what the district and schools are doing to ensure that our multilingual families are receiving all communications that are pertinent to the district that our English-speaking families are. So that would look like information about WIA testing, that would look like storm days, half days, and full days. That would be our weekly updates that I know Sam and Richard work very hard on, or the monthly updates that Maddie and Carrie work really hard on. Those currently aren't accessible for our families who don't speak English. Moving on.
Students are feeling more comfortable enough to ask for help or advice from us teachers. I know that quite a few of my students have reached out to kind of like they're struggling, say maybe for math. So I help them a little bit understanding the vocabulary behind a math lesson and being able to kind of explain their thoughts and how they arise to their solution and how to solve that math problem.
I also personally have to kick out at least 2 or 3 students a day from my room because they just show up and go, "Hey, Mr. Blacksmith, I'm working on this," or like, "I just want to talk to you about this." It's like, no, I'm working with other students here. I love you, but you gotta go. That has been a little bit difficult though, because I've had more than a few teachers talk to me about the fact that it would be really nice to have additional support for the MLL students in general classroom settings. At the high school, I know Watershed Academy has been tricky for some of my kids because there's so much information being thrown at them in some really advanced academic English. And in some of those instances, special ed techs have been stepping in to help fill that gap, but that does have the side effect of sometimes taking them away from the students that they're there to be with in the first place, because they really don't want to say, "No, students, I can't help you even though I see you really need it."
Students are learning enough to graduate from the program and drive on their own. One of my students from last year, she has passed the access test and she's thriving in the classroom. I already talked to her classroom teacher, and there are no struggles so far within her grade level classroom. She's making strides, and it's really great to see that.
Then the challenge with this is just the fact that we don't really have any standard and evidence-based curriculum provided by the district to ensure that students are receiving this instruction. I know personally when I came into this position after Ms. Pompey left, she took with her curriculum and her breadth of knowledge because that was all something that she developed by herself. So I spent a lot of last year very quietly internally panicking, going, "What am I going to teach these kids? What am I going to teach these kids?" And really having that self-doubt of, am I doing enough for them? Like, is this curriculum really working? And Lisa can attest to that because at one point last year, Dr. Bencross had to go and be like, "Hey, Eric is really struggling." And she didn't think that I was, because I was just being very quiet. And I was like, "No, I'm totally fine. I'm swimming." I was struggling. But the biggest success, the thing that makes me the most happy about this, is that our students across the board are communicating more and more every day with classmates, peers, with teachers, and with support staff. And that is in part thanks to you all for continuing to help our program grow. So we've thrown a lot at you, and I'm sure at least one of you probably has 3 or 4 questions based off of how the meeting or the board meeting has gone so far. So do you have any questions for us?
I mean, first, thank you. That was very helpful, and clearly a lot of preparation went into that presentation, so I appreciate that. I certainly have questions, but does anybody else have questions? Want to go first? This is first a comment, and this is not a reflection on either of you. This is a comment on the district that our LOUD plan is not publicly available. I just Googled for it and I can't find it. Most other districts it's out there somewhere, so. That's,
Be on our website.
is it? It may be buried, but it doesn't come up in a Google search.
It says it on the LOUD plan itself, it says it's available on the website. It actually says check rsu26.org for the most recent plan, but I'm in a similar situation. Each time I've tried to look it up, I haven't found it on the website. I always have to go into Google Drive to access it.
I mean, maybe it's an issue that I think our website's not indexed that well by Google, because I have a hard time finding academic calendars and things too, but Google search RSU26 LOUD plan gave me nothing. So again, that's not a reflection on either of you, but I think that's important. Since it's essentially our contract with parents, I always feel like those things should be out there. The standards of 2 periods for I forget what the level 1 was called.
Intensive
and the 1 period for academic English, which, fair enough, we're not meeting that based on resources available in this sort of exponentially growing program. Where does that come from? Is that a state standard? Is that something RSU26 set? What's the evidence base behind that?
The those numbers specifically are coming from our LOUD plan. So that's what was decided back in 2021 when this was really kind of fine-tuned and created. But it's also the recommendation from the state for best practice.
Okay.
And I have a colleague at Bangor, and the way that she does that with her students who are intensive English is she has 1 class where they're focusing on literacy and they're focusing on like the basic communication skills in English. And then the second class where they're really looking more at the academic language, because unfortunately, those 2 things you can't super easily teach in one setting. You have to have that additional time because students are absorbing so much just in regular conversation, but then there's a lot that they aren't getting from their classes because, as teachers like to say, read the directions, but they don't know how to read the directions because those words and that they're just so hyper specific to each class that they need that additional time to work on it.
And this isn't unusual as far as our region. There are recommended level of service and then there's reality in our smaller districts. I know at a regional level, we are talking about the possibility of having a regional MLL program for some of our students that require more intensive English. Where you go to South Portland, you go to Portland, and they have entire classes of, here's your social studies credit, but it's in an MLL format. And, same for all the various credit.
And I'll say Bangor is starting to move a little bit to that model. And then at the high school and middle school, we do have a little bit of that. My students receive English credit from the classes that they take with me if it's in replacement of a gen ed English class.
That's great. So I know in special education, kind of one of the core guiding concepts is least restrictive environment. Sounds to me like the core guiding concept here is instruction time. Basically that, depending on level of proficiency, we're giving you this amount of instruction. So as a hypothetical, a kid literally has arrived from a week ago with no English. Sounds like they would still be going to classes that are purely in English and having the instruction time of the standard. There's not really some sort of a overarching guideline of where students should be and when they should be someplace.
No, we had a few students like that last year. And the way that it worked for them was they would have their classes with Marley arrive, and then the rest of the day would be in English only, which I know might seem like maybe not the best idea, but these kids are sponges, and at that point, even exposure, even if they're not expressing much, is still really good for them because they're just getting used to hearing everything and seeing how their peers interact with each other during the day. So yeah, really our big thing is how much instruction time we're able to get with them to help them get the English they need to succeed elsewhere.
That makes sense. And I appreciate my son. We moved to Montreal and he went to preschool in French and he didn't speak a word for 3 months. And then the next day he was having full conversations. I do think that sponge effect is a bit age dependent. I think when you're getting a 16-year-old, it's not the same sponge as a 4-year-old. So I wonder if there's any age level, but it doesn't sound like that kind of issue is currently addressed in the philosophy, but I do think that there's an age level about how much just kids are sponges works or doesn't work, but going to numbers.
Do you want me to go back to those slides?
Yeah, it'd help to pull it up. I mean, I appreciate the basic number of exponential growth. I think more curious, I think some of this was driven by the fact that Bangor got identified as a refugee resettlement and Catholic Services was designated as an agency, and we were getting, in particular, surprised there's not more French, because one of the places we were identified was Southwest Africa, Angola, and places like that, with a lot of French speakers. But I think that's a lot of where the Arabic is coming from. It's probably not where the Chinese is coming from. Yes, I'm asking you to give me your best speculation of what's driving this exponential growth and whether it's going to continue or whether it's changed in the current political environment.
I know we here at the district had a lot of conversations about that. I've talked with my mentor at the MDOP a lot about this and some of my past teachers. And even though the climate is changing with the current administration, I do still think that we will see a growth in numbers. Part of that, honestly, is just word of mouth. Because once a family comes here, if their students like the environment, then they will start telling other families that they know in the area, like, hey, you should bring your kids to this school. I know Meredith had to sign at least 3 superintendent's agreements for some students from Old Town because they've got cousins who go here, and they would not stop talking about it last year. I think the biggest reason why our numbers haven't gone up as much as Bangor has, for example, is just the general housing situation within Orono and our sending schools. As we all know, it's very expensive to live in this neck of the woods because of the university and other things. But we also have seen an increase in students whose families are either attending the university or working at the university. So I think our numbers will really only go up. They might plateau a little bit every now and then, but I think they'll keep rising.
That would have to be my guess too, if I had to guess. And I mean, I already have that effect with special education. People move to Orono for special education. We have to be careful and respect the taxpayers, but I'm also proud of the fact that our district has that reputation, and I certainly would not be adverse to having that reputation for MLL too. But other questions people have?
So I am still learning how this all works. But did you have for all those languages? Do you have in-house? I mean, you have people that speak those languages to help the South students, or is it I don't know how
In-house, no.
Yeah.
One of the big debates within the field right now is how much translation and interpretation is beneficial for students.
Yeah.
Because it used to be really, they're here, let's give them everything translated. But at that point, are they learning the English?
Yeah.
Sure, we're seeing what they actually understand, but they're not getting that input plus ones. They're not getting that little push to keep learning a little bit more each day. There are instances where we do use interpretation or translation for students. Last year we had a situation with a student who made a very unwise, not so safe remark online, and we had to bring in an interpreter for the meetings for that because he just needed to know the severity of what it was that he said.
And also for the parents.
And for the parents too. The parents, if they request interpretation or translation, they always will receive that. Whenever a new family moves in, I send them an email going, "Hi, this is who I am. Do you need interpretation or translation?" And I'll send that in English and the language that they indicated on their survey. So they'll let me know if like, like I don't need translation because I can read the English well enough, but for meetings, I really would like an interpreter here. So families always get that interpretation translation if they need them. Students, it's a lot more situational.
And then I guess like for those parent communications, which you said was one of the holes, right? Like interpreting those weekly or monthly emails, like is that, how big a lift would that be to get? I mean, get the translated. Like-
So I can give you the numbers for it. So for the elementary schools monthly update, it would be around $385 each month to have that professionally done by Green Linguistics, and that's for 2 languages. That would be for Arabic and Spanish. Now, there is a service that Carrie and Maddie are already using called S'more, and one of the tiers of this has machine translation, which isn't always the greatest, but it's still more accessible than not having it translated at all. And that's $179 per account per year. So if the district were to go for that, it would really be an account for Maddie and Carrie, an account for the middle school, high school, and then one for Rachel, since she sends out the district-wide meetings.
And that would cover all of the languages.
And that would cover essentially all the languages that our families speak. And just be way more fiscally responsible than that $387 some odd dollars every month for.
Not to mention translation services, there's such a turnaround.
Yeah.
So you're sending out a monthly newsletter. You know, how long ahead of time are you gonna send it to the translation services? What's the turnaround time to get it back? So,
And with that, like the cheaper one, would that I mean, there's all the other like notifications that happen day of and all those kinds of things. You could route that all through that.
We could if we needed to. A lot of those more daily communications, we use interpreters. So we'll like call up the family and just be like, "Hey, this is going on," or we can leave them a message. Then I know some teachers use things like Remind or other services that have their own translation feature. So this would really be more for like the district-wide administration communication.
So Remind has like for all the languages, does it have that?
I don't think they have all of the languages that we're currently working with, but I know they're working on expanding what they have, because I think Remind works with Google Translate's API.
Remind me what fraction of parents were picking up with Arabic and Spanish?
So of our 13 languages, we have 5 that we currently need the interpretation and translation services for.
Okay.
I think for Arabic families, it's 2. Spanish, I've got, I think 2 or 3. Chinese is a little bit trickier. I have some families who only need it for interpretation, others need translation. As you can see with Thai, we really only have a small number of speakers, so we've only got 1 family that's using that. And then Nepali is also very small, but
And need is just based on whether the parents speak English or not.
sorry, say that one more time.
You said we have X number of families who need is defined whether the parents speak English or not.
It's defined whether or not they've indicated that they want the interpretation and translation, because that is a federally protected right. So if they speak English and another language, but they still indicate that they want that translation or that interpretation, we still provide it for them, because as any speakers of other languages know, sometimes you really just need that whole language, so you've got the full grasp of what's going on.
Especially with a complex or emotional issue around a student, sure.
So are you saying it just these 5 or the only 5 that the parent has indicated they want it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
A lot of our other languages come from areas where English is a lingua franca, so it's either like business or other purposes. And then other families, they're attending the university, so their English is to the point where they don't really need it, because they're navigating all of their complex research and papers that they'll sometimes try to explain to me. It's like, oh.
So I know if you go to a doctor's office, translation is also required by law, and they typically have a phone service, right, where you can call up and instantaneously or near instantaneously get pretty much any language. Is there a service that we use in that area?
Yeah, we use Green Linguistics.
Okay.
Previously, we used Language Line. But I had some qualms with the way that they charge for certain things. So we swapped to Green Linguistics, which is a smaller woman-owned company based out of, I think, Wisconsin. And they have 24/7 interpretation services. So you can just pick up the phone, you can dial in the number, enter your client ID, and then be like, hey, I need like Yoruba. And they're like, oh yeah, sure, let me.
Yeah, so you put in your client ID and then you select the language or the interpreter you want. It's really slick.
And I always tell teachers, don't be afraid of using the linguistics because it's really easy to use. The interpreters are very nice and they're always going down. They do a great job translating for what you need.
You anticipated where I was heading is whether we're making that service available to the teachers and teachers know,
So usually during my language school conferences that are coming up, I usually like share with the classroom teachers the list and the number to call the language line, and I tell them if you ever need me to kind of like walk you through it, I'm always there to help you.
And additionally, I created a Google form that I think at this point is on all of the different staff Google Classrooms. I hope so that way staff can access it. But that's where they can let us know ahead of time whether they need a document translated, say, for band or orchestra, or if they know that they're meeting with a parent and they'd really like to schedule that beforehand. So if they've got access to that, if they don't want to have to worry about any of it, all they have to do is tell me what they need, when they need it, and when they need it by, and I'll set it all up for them, and then they just get it completed once it's done.
Great. I guess I got a couple more questions. So, I know there's big differences between MLL and special education, but, two terms in the special education world would be accommodation and IEP. Are there analogs for that in MLL and how do those work?
We still use accommodations, truthfully, whenever we have a student who's dual identified, so special ed and multilingual, we'll get together during their IEP meetings, and our accommodations essentially look the same.
The complication with students that are dually identified is in identification. So if their primary language is.
Right, how do you test and think that way?
I mean, to do it fair, it's you wanna test in their primary language. And, we have students that come in, they have evaluations that have already been done, but they've been done in English. How does that accurately reflect? We were just having a conversation, I was talking to our examiner about, why don't we do a nonverbal IQ test, and that will give us at least a fair number. And I'm also working with, we've used, platforms, presence learning in the past for some, services that were, online. They do provide some, evaluations in other languages. And I also met with Boothby this week and asked them about, providing evaluations in other languages. The thing with, that's a small number that's growing. They have to be licensed in this state in order for us to be able to access them. I was able to find one with presence learning, but they said, hey, if you're gonna use this, you have to agree to so many hours of our services. So at the time I said, no, I'm circling back with them saying, this is at least some business. We have this need, can you fill it? So it's.
I mean,
I think the question was more not dual identification.
I'm interested in dual identification, but I actually was wondering, not dual identified, but just, intensive or academic English. Are they expected to do every single assignment in the same amount of time and take a test in the same amount of time as a native English speaker?
So that's really determined on a student per student basis in what we call an ILAP meeting, which stands for Individual Language Acquisition Plan. So you can kind of think of that like the MLL version of an IEP, just way less mandated by federal law. So we don't have as much that we have to do for it. But when Marley was talking about meetings earlier with her families, that's what it was. Because each ILAP involves looking at our students' assessment data, so the WIDA screen or the WIDA access test, looking at how they're doing in their classes, how they're doing with us, and really figuring out like, okay, is this accommodation of giving them note catchers working? Are they using it? And if not, how can we fix that? And then setting up their goals, which are generally they feel like kind of mumbo jumbo languagey. Like we can understand them if we look at them, but we're working on trying to make it so that way the families and the teachers can look at it and go, okay, the student is working on expressing their wants or desires in 3 to 5 word sentences and so on.
And that way it looks a little bit like an IEP. So those goals are things that are decided at the ILAP.
Yeah.
They also have accommodations, and you guys put the accommodations in Power School,
Yeah.
just like we do for 504 and IEP students.
So there could be test time accommodations, for
Yep.
example.
We have quite a few students who have testing accommodations. I know for the NUIAs, I got an email from Susan going, hey, which students need to have bilingual glossaries and can you please make sure that they have them? Because finding those sometimes is really tricky. Some students have, I know it's not called time and a half anymore, but they've got extra time for assessments. Other students are able to provide oral responses instead of written responses. And yeah, we make sure that if a student needs an extra accommodation on a test, that they have it.
Great. So, we're not in the budget conversation, but, in a hypothetical world where we stay flat and don't have any growth, I'm going to just guess, since we're delivering half of the LAU plan meeting times, it would take double staffing to actually meet the LAU plan skip. Or do you think there's some synergies where it might be less than that?
I think, I don't know if you have different thoughts on this, but I know I've had some staff at the high school talk to me about how it would be beneficial to have an ed tech in certain instances. But I think when it really comes down to it, and like the ideal perfect world where we keep growing or we stay consistent, even just one more certified 660 educator would make a huge difference. That could mean somebody else is down at the elementary school to help out with Marley's load for part of the day, or they're up here at the middle school and high school with me to meet students for like their second class of the day if they're academic English. But the biggest thing comes down to scheduling, and there being too few of us and too many schedules to try to coordinate.
Yeah, sure. I imagine the ILET plans are hard to get. I mean, I know even with IEPs, it's hard to get them all in for the, I forget what the mandated time is, 60 days or whatever it is. So
Actually, just following up on your question, like, sounds like, so some of that time is the ILAP. And but so outside of the only half of the number of hours the students are getting, but if you had one more, so you have 3, do you feel like you could meet the LAU plan threshold or goal targets, or?
I think so, because some teachers have asked me to have more time with these students. And sometimes doesn't always work, because sometimes I might have a student that's a higher proficiency level, they're a different grade level, and this time just doesn't work because I'm already servicing a different grade level at that time.
So it sounds like 3 might be enough. And then I guess.
I mean, just to pause you for a second, I know we're putting you on the spot, so we're not taking that as a final answer. You guys can talk to Lisa and Lisa can come back with a budget proposal, but just wanted to get a ballpark sense of what we're talking about, but don't feel like that was a final answer.
You committed to it.
That would be quite the answer to have to make us give right on the spot.
Yeah,
What do you need? Oh, no.
Oh, so like, and what is there, I mean, we talked about before, like, if we're not meeting these, it's like, there's a court mandated reason we have to meet it, like, what, is there any, it's like,
Yeah,
or is there something on the
Repercussions,
line?
yeah, quite a few school districts across the state have gone through that exact rigmarole, where the Department of Justice, somebody makes a civil rights violation complaint, the DOJ comes through and goes, and then they get involved, and that is a whole lengthy ordeal. I know Waterville was dealing with it. I think Lewiston had it.
dealt with that when they had to change their RAL plan and then also like make sure that we are meeting the service requirements. For my past district, I had to pull out twice a day for my level 1s and 2s for 40-minute blocks. And then for my level 3s and 4s, I had to push out, pull out for one service block for 40 minutes a day.
So there's some real threat of actual comments or something, someone checking potentially,
Yeah.
or like.
I will say though, I think the level of service we're providing is more than quite a few districts around us. When I hear the level of staffing in other districts, I don't know. And I know they have students, even if you have a handful, you would need more services than they have staffing for. So I think in the grand scheme of things, we're doing quite well.
I would
Yeah,
agree.
I would like to, just
Sorry, Ash.
lay that as a, overlay to this conversation. I don't want for folks to feel like there are alarm bells.
No, and I wanna
That
add
is not.
to that, so if I understood it, it's not nearly as federally regulated as like
Right.
special ed is, right? So there is no, correct me if I'm wrong. I got the impression there is no minimum plan that has to be met or you're in trouble. It's kind of left up to the districts, and some districts like us are doing better than other districts. Am
I
I
think
correct?
there's the
Loud plan.
recommendations, as far as I understand. There are recommendations that the DOE puts out there, and I believe the last time we updated our WOW plan, we went with those recommendations. But it's not mandated.
Correct, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the getting in trouble part isn't as bad. We don't want to be
It's
there, but
just-
it's not as bad as we,
Yeah.
we may think.
No,
And
it's
it's a
not
civil
a
rights
doom
base,
and
it's
gloom.
not some absolute
Right.
standard we have to meet.
Right.
Yeah,
Really,
Yeah.
that Lao plan came from the 1997 Lao v. Nichols case, which was out in California when a lot of Chinese speaking families, their students weren't getting like any kind of additional help in school. It was just like English only, English only, English only, English only. And these students were really falling behind. So a family, the Lao family, was like, we're gonna try to sue the school district over this. And that's when the requirement of having the Lao plan became a federal law. So all school districts across the United States are required to have this, but the exact number and like that is all more like recommendation or practice based. So it's not as doom and gloom as it might feel, as Meredith pointed out. Right, we are doing way better than a lot of other districts that I've talked to. But that is unfortunately just a very real specter kind of hanging it out in the background. If somebody is unhappy with how services are going or something and they decide to make that complaint, that's when it could really come in.
I mean, just to echo what Meredith said, I'm not gonna name other districts, but we have neighboring districts that are 50 to 100% more students and have a single MLL person, so.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, there's a reason why people are moving to this district. So,
Just to be clear, though, there are some federal requirements coming out of Lao. I mean, that's a language case that has all kinds of implications based out of the 64 Civil Rights Act, right? I mean, the reason why you have to provide ballots in multiple languages is because of Lao. So there are some federal requirements there.
Yeah.
What the repercussions are, I don't know, but, and the state can make recommendations, but the origins of this are federal requirements. So we're all on the same page with that.
it has been a very informative conversation for me. Are there other questions? I appreciate both of your time and attention to this.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
and
much.
I also appreciate the great job you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have the WIA norms.
Yeah.
You get the really exciting topics here, huh?
I do, really excited. So then I'm gonna have Meredith share, is that, yeah, thanks, Meredith. And so, you just go to that second slide, and we'll cover you or outline of, sort of where we'll go with this conversation. Start with a little bit of background on the new NWA testing, algorithm and the new norms. Those norms are set about every 5 years, so we were functioning with the 2020 norms and we're now functioning with the 2025 norms. That's because they were published in 2025, so they have that year attached to them, but they're based on the school years 2022-23 and 23-24. just a little bit of background there. 13.8 million students took the test in that time span. And there's 116 million test scores that were used to go into the new norms. All 50 states and over 30,000 districts are represented in that in this data that you're going to see tonight. So we'll look at those new norms and think about them a little bit, and then we'll have some time to sort of compare our students' scores last spring using the 2020 norms, and what does those same students, same scores last spring look like using the 2025 norms for both achievement and growth for reading and math, and have some time maybe for some reflection and discussion as well. So one of the big changes that happened in addition to students changing is that the NWA has started using a new algorithm called the enhanced item selection algorithm. And they did that because they are trying to more closely align the types of questions students are getting to the instruction that's happening in the classroom. So that change happened in addition to kids changing, teachers changing, COVID happened. And so I'm going to start by explaining that new ESA, because we needed another acronym, I guess, a model and what that means. So in the legacy mapping, which was how NWA used to do the testing, this example is like a fourth grade student. And a fourth grade student would need potentially a question at the 200 grit level. And as you can see in the graph here, that as we go up the grades, there's part of the question set is at 200 level, even up into 8th grade. There's a few 200 questions that are in an 8th grade set, and even down as far as kindergarten. And so when the student needed a grit question at the 200 level, the assessment algorithm chose any of those 200 level questions. So sort of like grabbing from a bag of marbles with multiple colors, and it didn't matter if it was kind of an 8th grade question or a 2nd grade question. It would just grab another 200 level grit question for the next question for students to have. The newer method, this enhanced algorithm, really looks first for a 200 level question that is in the student's grade that they're taking the test in. So a 4th grade question at the 200 level for math or English question would be more aligned to content that the students had been taught in 4th grade. So it checks for a 4th grade question before it looks through all 200 level questions. It then will go either up or down 1 to 2 grades. So it's refining what set of questions it's pulling from first. Now,
Can I just ask a quick?
Yeah.
So what does the RIT 200 mean? I thought that meant like what grade level you're at, as opposed to like.
So the RIT scale is just a Roush unit. That's what RIT stands for. And it's a measurement that a student, as they progress with their knowledge, those numbers get bigger.
It's a scaled score.
But how's that different from grade level? I mean, essentially.
So if I take a test and I'm in NWA land and I get a RIT score of 200, it doesn't matter if I was in 2nd grade or 5th grade. My score on average is that 200.
But like, so when you say a thing is a 4th grade level, that.
This is tied to curriculum, right?
It's like.
Right,
what,
it's tied.
It's 4th grade curricular
we haven't gotten to
questions.
geometry yet, so it wouldn't.
Right,
Be
so what, for example, and this was one of our 3rd grade teachers said, you know, the question that her 3rd grade student got, because they are a pretty high reader, was instead of kind of staying within content that might have been closer to a 3rd grade exposure type of level, they were asked a question about Macbeth and some of the content from Macbeth.
Okay.
Because they were looking for a question that was at that higher levels.
Very simple question about Macbeth that is a subject that they wouldn't have.
That might not, right.
Okay.
Yeah, or a more complex question about Macbeth, but it's the content is that higher level rather than content that would have been exposed.
Or even like genre, right? I don't know when we teach genre, maybe it's in 6th grade and you have a 3rd grader who's an excellent reader, but is asked about genres.
Yeah.
And that's a content knowledge question and not a raw ability question.
Okay.
that making sense
Well,
somewhat?
Easier in the, I was thinking more in math, yeah, but I think you get it, okay.
But fractions are taught in a certain year and, right, and areas of geometric objects are taught in a certain year and those kinds of things.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and math is more sequential often, right,
Yeah,
in that learning
that's-
progression. So instead of just jumping all of a sudden to a question that might be more taught in eighth grade, because it's a lower level eighth grade question, it sticks first within that grade.
Yeah, and I guess part of my question, and maybe I don't want to get too extra, but like our sequence may not match other district sequences and how we divide up things, and so that's why it's like, it
Right.
doesn't necessarily, yeah,
Yeah, it might not line up exactly, but
yeah.
I think that, yes, you're right.
There is a national curriculum standard, which most states are either admittedly or not admittedly derived from.
Yeah.
So we use the math and the reading portions of tests from NWA. Those are aligned to the Common Core state standards. So that is pretty much across the nation, right? And it's a little confusing in Maine because we have the Maine learning results, which we're supposed to teach, but our federal accountability standards are still the Common Core state standards. And so our kids are tested on the Common Core state standards for federal purposes, even though they don't quite match the Maine learning results. It's a little wonky how that is. So these are based on the Common Core state standards for the learning content. So it's reaching first into the bag of marbles that's the same color basically as the student's grade level, trying to find questions at that grade level for some of the content rather than reaching across a bigger variety of grade spans. As we're looking at these new norms, we want you to keep that that new algorithm in mind. That ISA algorithm is probably more closely aligning questions for kids to potential content that they've been learning in the classroom, and so that might have elevated some of the scores. Or COVID happened, and that probably has helped decrease some of those scores. And then our population has changed in all kinds of ways, and that's kind of a bit of a unknown factor. Sort of what's happening there has influence, but we're not quite sure what some of that influence is. So screen time, right, might have some positive influence and might have some really negative influence as well. So as we're looking at the norms, just wanting you to keep in mind that we're not just seeing like learning loss from COVID, but there's new data, a new way they work the algorithm for the test. So they've improved the test, and then sort of the context of the world right now is a little different as well. So what they found is that the norms have shifted lower and are more broadly distributed, more variable. So the gray curve here is where the 2020 norms are for all those 13 point whatever million students. And the 2025 norms are now in that pink curve. So this is a heat table or heat diagram. Gonna look at reading first, and brighter colors are more different than where they used to be, and then the lighter colors are closer to where they used to be in the past. So if I just look at the 50th percentile column and then kindergarten going across, if I was a kindergarten student and I was at the 50th percentile before, then whatever that number was for kindergarten, so maybe it was a 168, was at the 50th percentile. Now a 167 would be at the 50th percentile for the kids. So the individual kids scores are the same, but how they compared relative to their classmates and grade level peers across the nation has shifted. So their score is still a 190, whatever it was, or 168, which means they're ready for this content next. But that score compared to the kids across the nation has changed. And as kids are at the higher percentile in kindergarten, so kids that are at the 95th percentile, there was no change in their norms for kindergarten. Kids that are were at the lower level, those norms have decreased. So if a student were struggling, those kids are struggling more. Their numbers shifted down. And so that top right corner there, sort of first grade, second grade, third grade, you can see that those impacts were fairly negative. So the scores shifted lower. The standard error measure for the NWA test is plus or minus 3. So anything that's 0, 1, 2, that could be, you know, kind of close to the variability that was pretty typical. But when we see like -6, that's really a fairly large decrease. So as we look at this, we can see that our lower performing students across the nation are performing even lower. And the middle to upper performing students for the variety of grade levels, K to 8, are performing kind of about the same or a little bit lower.
So wait, these are shifts in just theoretically how you would score the same score, right?
Basically a shift in the national average. That's not what they call it, but
So if I was if this student scored a 200, right?
Yeah.
At 200 in sort of teacher thought means, okay, this kid knows this and needs to know this next, right? It gives them a place on this scale of learning continuum. So they understand this material, and they need to know this next. A student scored a 200, they still need to know that same kind of things. But a 200 compared to kids across the nation may no longer be at that 50th percentile or at the 97th percentile or whatever that 200 indicated for that particular grade level.
I mean, it's as simple as saying in the second grade, if the 5th percentile was 150 in the 2020 norms, it's now, when I say 150, it's 143
Right.
in the 2025 norms.
Right.
So the percentiles have moved
Yeah.
because the
Like
national,
that chart.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it normalizes lower scores.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
shifted the
Yeah.
baseline lower based on national averages.
So after like all those changes, the 3 things you mentioned, the scores are now lower, basically.
Well, the 3 things we mentioned were just like
Yes.
other factors.
Right, but yes, the scores are lower in reading, and they're even lower in reading for lower level
And
kids.
some of that's because the test changed, and some of that's because maybe the population changed.
And COVID happened.
Presumably COVID is dominating these results, and
Okay.
COVID increased inequities, and that's what you see in those first, second, third grade scores, right? Is the inequities, right, between, have gotten bigger instead of smaller. Not so much in the higher grades. Everybody just went down.
And kids that were scoring higher percentile wise, that didn't shift much for them.
Does anybody come up with an explanation for why the inequities seem to be worse for reading than for math? Because you would have assumed it would have been the other way around, right? That's the part that doesn't make any sense.
So yeah, let's look at the math, which is the next slide on here. In math, like green is a positive shift, right? And so when we look at kids, especially in that, you know, K1, 2, 3, 4, kids that were performing pretty well actually are doing better and that they were in the 2020 norms. And NWA would say that's because they feel that that's in great effect because of that enhanced algorithm for picking the next question. And because math is more linear, they're saying we've gotten better at picking questions that are more aligned to the content that they learned. Now, I don't know, I haven't dug like really deep into that, but that's one of their theories.
They don't structure their questions based on different state standards, right?
No, it's really based on those Common Core state standards across the nation.
Good.
Yeah. And so kids at the younger grades for math made some improvement if they were already performing pretty well. Kids at the younger grades for math were gained or lost more if they were already low kids. So the lower were performing lower and the higher are performing higher in
So
math.
the gap just widened up, it's 10 points instead of 7 points.
So, you know, back to those first 2 curves, kind of, you know, the they move this way.
Yes, well, and I guess we don't know for sure whether that's because they're better characterizing students or the tests are even more. The artifacts of the test are distributing students when they shouldn't be, which is one of the critiques we've heard of this. That like once you get into, it's hard to, you kind of get like a runaway effect of whichever direction you start off in the test.
In education.
Well, in NWA,
Or in
like,
NWA,
in the schooling,
yeah.
there's a run, there could be like a runaway effect where like you start to get in the hole and you get worse and worse, and your score becomes hard to recover. In particular.
I haven't seen that as a huge effect in the Maria's.
I've just heard that, I don't know, maybe.
I haven't seen that either. I think, the questions do get harder or easier, but it depends on what the response was to the student for the
I
previous
don't see how that could be the case, given the way NWA is structured.
I mean, you get easier questions, but then you start to get them right, you start to get harder questions
So I
again.
don't-
Well, what I had heard, and again, like this is all just like hearsay, right, is that the algorithm for picking question depends, like the first few you pick, like the first few answers are like, whether you get them right or wrong, sets you into a place that becomes harder to recover from.
I wouldn't say harder to recover. It just sets you to a place where you are maybe hopefully more likely to get them right. But it also goes the other way. So if you're getting them right, it will give you harder questions.
Yeah, I understand the theory, but yeah, okay, I don't know.
And one of the things that I think is happening in schools a little bit too is, well, I do know that NWA knows where the kids' RIT score was from the previous time they tested. So they often start questions at about that level for the kids. So it's not this random broad spectrum of questions that they're pulling from. They start the students close to where they ended at the last test. That seems to be maybe a little bit different for third grade when we use the through year test, because the through year test is a little different from the growth test that we use in K2. But it does start kids, if they've taken the NWA test before, close to where they left off for that first couple of questions. So that's what the achievement picture looks like. Kids that were doing well are doing about the same in reading. But kids that were struggling in reading are doing worse in reading across the nation. Kids that are doing well in math, lower grades are doing even better and on the NWA test, and other ones that were struggling are performing worse.
Those are huge change. If those are RIT changes in RIT growth, those are huge changes because RIT growth is like 7 points.
It depends, right? For like a first grader, RIT growth expectation is like 20 points,
Right.
and a ninth grader it's like 4.
Yeah.
So that's actually the next slide, changes from fall to spring.
Oh, that one.
That one, yeah. Is that, were you there already? Yeah. Yes. So there are some big changes there.
It's one thing to go from 150 to 147, but it's another to go from an expectation of 15-point growth to 10-point growth.
Yes. The reading kind of showing less growth, especially at the 25th percentile and lower. Math showing more growth, particularly for those students that were already higher. The slide 11 here about high school, in the information from NWA, they do kind of give a little bit of a caution about high school, particularly 11th and 12th grade. Across the nation, like here in Maine, there are lots of 9th and 10th grade students that take the NWA test, but fewer 11th and 12th grade students. And if 11th and 12th grade students are taking the NWA assessment, it's more often for some specific learning needs, and more likely that they might be like an MLL student or have an IP or something that they're kind of trying to dig a little more deeply into information for that student in grade 11 and 12. So just kind of keep that in mind, that the pool of kids that they're pulling from in those grade levels is different than the other grade levels. But again, sort of math growth in 9th, 10th grade, not bad, kind of about the same, maybe a little better, but the actual achievement is a little lower, and we're like, how can that be? And that is because these these two bar graphs or bars here are not breaking down by the percentiles. It's the overall picture, not, so we've got growth here, cancels out, decreases here. Makes sense?
Wonder if we're on the same slide.
Are you on the high school? Slide?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, when teachers were saying this, they were having a really hard time saying, how can spring achievement be 1 point lower for 9th and 10th grade? But the growth from fall to spring be 1 point higher for 10th grade. So overall, yeah. It's because there's a huge variety in the groups of kids. And then, reading, shifted down for 9th and 10th grade, but even more so for 11th and 12th, but we don't use their tests with those kids in that grade.
Fall to spring growth, that's based on, so the things that this is all like the renorming.
Yes.
Post renorming.
Yeah.
And that started for the tests like last fall and spring?
22, 23, and 23, 24.
The data was collected from those tests. They weren't reported out with the new norms. When were the new norms used is what he's asking.
When are the new norms used?
This
Now.
This fall's for.
our next data workshop in December will be the first time you see the new norms.
Okay, and so the shift in the way the test was structured all began in 2022. No.
Yes, it did actually, and it even began before that. Some states were using that enhanced model even before that. And in Maine, we started using that enhanced model during those years.
For the 3-year or for all?
For the 3-year for sure, I don't know for sure for the other ones.
Okay. That's the first time I heard about it was around the 3-year test, yeah.
Okay.
Let's keep going, there's more.
So, yeah, so just kind of overall, thinking about achievement that went down in math and reading, especially for kids at the lower levels. Growth went down for reading, especially kids at the lower levels. For math, it went up at the top levels. I'm gonna kind of skip to slide 14. These are our students' scores. The same group of students, the exact same set of scores, but how they compare to the nation now has shifted. So the blue bar is using the 2020 norms and the red bar is using the 2025 norms. So this is the percent of our students that were at or above the grade level mean. And if we look at like 3rd grade, for example, using the old norms, 60% of our kids were at or above the grade level mean, and using the 2025 norms, that's 75% at or above the grade level mean. So you could say, well, our kids did better, or you could say our kids
Didn't drop as much as the national average.
As the nation did.
Spring 25 data that we were previously given was using the old 2020 norms.
Right.
So really what we thought was a bigger decline wasn't as big, right?
Well, in absolute terms, it was just as big.
Right.
Relative to the nation terms, it was not as big.
Yes.
Right. Relative to the nation, it was not as big. Yeah.
But that's really how we look at it.
Yes. So what we thought was not great was less not great.
It all depends on what your benchmark is.
But usually we benchmark it against the national.
This is normally.
That's what we normally do.
Right. So this kind of shows that same data set with those two norms to give us that context.
Like last year when we saw a drop, if everybody across the country saw that same drop, we wouldn't have known that. Right, because we were just looking at norms.
Not last year, we wouldn't have.
We were looking at norms that were
Right,
norms.
because everybody across the country is still using the 2020.
And so now we know, like, in theory, that, because our data on what's actually happening in the nation is lagged by several years.
All schools, it is.
Yeah, so that's just like trying to contextualize it.
Yeah.
I mean, one way to look at this is we're still, a high ranked school because we're way ahead of the national average. Another way to look at this, we can't see it on this graph, is our students are doing less well than they were 4 years ago.
Can folks online see the chart still?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And so presumably everybody around the nation is saying the same thing in their board meeting tonight, right?
Right.
Which is that, oh, we didn't do as
We weren't as bad as we thought we were.
Everything
right?
is.
But if you look at the results from the NAEP test, for example, those have gone down for reading and math, and yeah, this is another way to show that, yeah, overall, we've gone down as a nation.
I think the answer to that is it depends on where you
Where you
where you
started too,
were.
right?
Because
Well,
the shift isn't gonna be the same for everyone. It depends on where how your scores were curved,
So they'd be at a lot of
distribution.
low performing
Yeah.
students, they're doing worse. But if you have a lot of high performing students, to be at that same level, you might have to do even better. Which is, we'll see a little bit in math when we get there in a second. So the next slide is about student growth and what percent of our kids made their student growth expectation. And so the second to the bottom row is from spring 24 to spring 25, using those old norms for how much growth should that kid have shown. And the percentages there are the percent of our kids that made that growth. And then the bottom row is from using those new 2025 norms. And what percent of our kids made growth using those 2025 norms. And so like most of these for us kind of stays the same or goes up. So grade 1 was 60%, but the new norm, 64% of the kids make their growth. Grades 2 and 3, that's exactly the same. Grades 2, 3, and 4. 5 goes up a little, 6 goes up a little, 7 goes up quite a bit. So kids in our school are more of them are now making that growth expectation because that growth expectation shifted across the nation.
My guess is though the vast majority of these differences are not statistically significant though. I mean, maybe 7th grade, probably 7th grade. The rest of them I would imagine are not. That's just a guess, but
Yeah.
I would assume the answer is no.
Different from a previous year or different from 50%?
Well, different based, if you look at both the 24-25 under both models, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
spring 24 to spring 25 under both different sets of norms.
Yeah.
Most of those differences are statistical wash.
Yeah.
With the exception probably of 7.
Right.
Or grade 7 probably is significant.
Right.
Yep. And then the next slide goes back to our quadrant graphs that we like. The top left slide is what using the old norms. And this graph happens to have all of our kids from kindergarten all the way up. And what percent that top right corner, the green, is above mean in achievement and above the average in growth. And the bottom left is below the average in achievement and below the average in growth. And orange is good growth, but still below grade level, and yellow is above grade level, but less growth. So for us, we have 53% in that top right quadrant using those new norms, where we used to have 43% in that top right quadrant using the old norms. So it's kind of shifted that direction. And then fewer in that good growth, but still below grade level orange box. That went from 12% to 8%. And then 25 to 18% for the below and below. Math looks a little different. So the bars here, comparing those two, same set of student scores, but compared to the national norms, we're still kind of closer to those national norms, same as we were before. So there aren't as many shifts there compared to the reading. And for growth, some of those shifts happened, but they tend to be fewer kids making their growth targets than they were in the past. So if it shifted a little bit, shifted down, and as Mark pointed out, probably not statistically significantly, but that's kind of how the shift happened for math. And if we think back to, well, our top performing kids had to make more growth to meet their growth norm. If they were top performing, that kind of makes some sense here. And then the shifts in the quadrant graphs, not nearly as different as those shifts were in the for reading. So kind of the same for math. So when we have reports that we're sending home for parents, once we finish this fall testing window, we want to make sure that parents have some information and context for their kids, because they could get a report that showed that their student got a 200 last spring, and last spring they were at the 48th percentile, and now that kid on the same graph, still got 200 last spring, but now that graph is showing that they're at the 53rd percentile, and parents may notice those differences. So we want to give them some language that will help explain that to them. And this is what we're anticipating that we would be using when we share information with parents around their child's testing for this fall. And then wanting to point them to some resources if they are interested in digging for more. And there's some resources online, or they can always give a call as well.
When you share that, you're going to like all of the past scores get sent, right?
All the past scores get sent, and NWA has made it now so all of those past scores are relative to the 2025 norms as the default.
Right. So they're gonna get a piece of paper, and if they don't remember anything from the past, they'll see their kid's history of all the NWA tests, and it'll look.
Yes,
If
they
they
will.
have
If they have their paper and
Yeah.
compare them, or think it right. Thank you for many parents that will make a big difference, but we have some in our district that I think it will, that they do pay attention to that. And there's some kids that pay attention to that too.
And are there NWA scores available like on like house score kind of anywhere for
No.
families? It's just a piece of paper that goes home. That's the only access they get to it.
Yeah, it's not in house school, correct?
Right. Yeah.
I don't remember what the previous norm year was before 2020, but I think I've probably seen, it was maybe my 4-3 norming. I don't think the other years have changed that much, correct?
No, the other years they've changed like fractions of a point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do this about every 5 years, right?
Just about.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock. Please feel free to go ahead and head out.
Any other questions or thoughts?
I mean, I just don't know what to do with this. I mean, if we want to look better, we look better, but it's not really a very satisfying looking better to me. Our kids are still not performing like they were a few years ago.
Yeah. So when we look at our fall scores, I think it's just important to kind of keep that in mind, that context too. So because it is all going to be normed now to the 2025 norms.
I mean, clearly the biggest piece of this was COVID, but ESA's kind of hanging under this too. Did they do ESA because they're increasingly being used as statewide ESSA tests and they're trying to conform to curriculum assessment more?
I don't know how NWA would answer that question. Could be.
Well, I think also in this time, they've been bought out by a very big company.
Yeah.
Who might have slightly different ideas about how that,
Yes.
adjusting scale, adjusting questions works, and how adjustable they want it to be.
Well, I'm suspicious of motivations for scores. Like there might be reasons they want them to look more spread out because it makes it seem like a test that's doing more.
Well, and yeah, they're also bought by a big publishing company, and the big publishing company wants us as educators to all buy their software that connects. Your kid got this in the RIT score, exactly this, use this software, and we'll plug them in right there, and we'll do your curriculum and your teaching for you, so they do have.
I don't know that's it, it's just the timing of this ESA thing aligns with that change too.
Yeah. there's, yeah, the motive scale, the motives and agenda certainly changed, had a step change at that point in time. In general, I feel like I was always very happy with NUIA because it was a very targeted, high quality test and was not one of these big, state standardized tests that told you nothing. And I kind of feel like we're going down the rabbit hole of it turning into just another bad educational test. And which is unfortunate because we've invested a lot in trying to build a history with NUIA scores, and I wouldn't suggest changing tests, but kind of feels like it's a double down.
To get to the individual student level, though, I think it is helpful.
Yeah.
This, right? I think
Yeah.
it's more helpful there. And we do have some information and data that kind of shows kids are having a hard time with this concept, and or this type of question is what this individual student was struggling with. So if we take the time, and teachers do, to look at that type of information, I think that's still pretty helpful, but not so much this, maybe the big picture of things.
You're right, that's always been one of its strengths, is that it is diagnostic of what to teach, not just retrospective of how well we taught.
So just to remind, so that you get more than just a score for
You
each.
get part scores broken out by subtopics like geometry versus algebra.
And can that be, is that ever summarized across classes? I think that's just like all of the individual.
We have reports for that.
Teachers get it from checking individual kids, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Not something that we would get, but teachers can do that, and then do that, right? So that is also useful.
But they also look at it as departments, they look at, the sub-test scores and for the reasons Susan was
I mean,
mentioning.
it's unfortunate that this, what was in the world of standardized testing, for a pretty good tool, has been bought out by a much larger publishing company who also wants to sell materials, right? But there is still, at least it would seem, there's still quite a bit of value here for now. We'll have to see where it goes.
I think it does continue to lose some of its value for kids at the higher grades, particularly high school.
Yeah.
This is my two
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And we're gonna come back, I think December is the workshop, right? We're gonna come back in December to see our actual fall scores, but people ready to move on for now? Thank you, Susan. That's not the simplest topic to try and navigate. So staff nominations, I would move to adopt the co-curricular slate as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Definitely too long to read tonight, but there's a copy in the board folder. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. Next up, we have some series of policies. These are all out of the policy committee. They're all pretty small policy changes. Let's start with DKC. This was required to be put in place by our federal audit, I think, for SPED. They wanted to know that we had an reimbursement policy. Basically, Meredith and Lynn worked on this in quite a bit of detail. We did discuss it at a policy committee. This is a new policy. It was not on the books before. So I think the only tweak the policy committee made was kind of emergency expenses not having to be approved in advance. So I would make a motion to recognize a first read of policy DKC and DKC-R as presented. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
We got a second first.
Oh, sorry, second.
I'll second.
Thank you. And all those in favor for first read passes 4-0. Next up is EVBD. This was thanks to the state legislature who do not want to fund new HVAC equipment, but do want to put districts on the hot seat. Sorry, that's my
Or the
editorial.
cold seat, right?
What's that?
Or the Colson.
Yeah, my editorial comment. Drummond and Woods, we were waiting for Drummond and Woodson to come out with a recommended policy. We took it, but as you'll see, we actually made Drummond and Woodson was pretty complicated about
This was
minimums.
actually MSMA, but maybe Drummond help them, but
All of the MSMAs come from Drummond and Woodson as far as I know, but yeah, they wanted to have two zones and different behaviors in different zones, and we just felt like that was too complicated, so we're setting 60 to 88. And instead of saying you take an action when you're outside of the zone, we're saying as you approach the boundaries of the zone, you should start to do obvious things like closing shades or opening windows or closing windows. And we are acknowledging that due to construction, this is not a guaranteed temperature zone. So I would make a motion. This is also a new policy, so I would make a motion to recognize a first read on policy EBBD as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
Discussion or questions?
A pretty wide range of temperatures there.
Well,
Yes.
68 to 82 is pretty tight.
Wait, it's 68?
Well, originally, that was what was recommended, 68 to 82.
That they were trying to do, like, this is what's optimal, and then this is what's, like a concerning level.
I mean,
And structuring it that way, and that's just too complicated,
Yeah.
we just want
Yeah.
a range of where.
It's also gonna invite all sorts of discussions about you're not in the optimal zone, and we're like, we know it's 88 outside, and it's 83 in the classroom. It doesn't, I don't think it serves us well to have called 82 an optimal zone, but saying we're willing to go up to 88, it's easier to just say 60, 88 is what we're thinking could happen in a classroom potentially.
It sounds, I wouldn't wanna be in a classroom that's near, like, it's 61 or 87.
Yeah, during COVID, we were just looking back at COVID times that we, told people to dress warm when we were trying to get more air exchanges, when we
Yeah.
had a lot of, concern about transmission.
Yeah.
So, that was why we put it at that point, just remembering back to what we had to do at that time.
Nobody's saying this is the target that we're setting our
Yeah.
thermostat at. This is. Honestly, this is because it's required by state law to have something, and this is what we think we can achieve.
Given our buildings.
99% of the time, given our HVAC systems and the operating conditions we have.
Yeah, I mean, we're not making changes in terms of
Yeah.
how we run heat and buildings.
Yeah, but the whole point of this policy from the state was to put us into a liability situation, right? They're not helping us actually do anything about it. So we're gonna keep doing the best we can as we have done before, and we already have an SREP coming in that's gonna try and help us. We're gonna keep doing our best, but we're not gonna go out of our way to create a lot of liability, whether it's legal or just conversational liability about, you're not in the optimal zone. My classroom's not in the optimal zone. Get down here right away.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the only requirement is we have a policy.
Correct.
We should have had 50 to 100 in here.
We could have.
Okay.
Okay. I think we could have just said, here's our policy, this document constitutes our policy and call it good. But it would have been the plan.
It would have. It's tempting, but probably not wise. All right, I think we had a motion. Do we have a second on this already?
I think I did, but if not, I will do for that.
Okay, any other conversation or ready to vote? All those in favor? First read is recognized. Move on to JKAA, which is physical restraints. I mean, to give you the legislative context, about 2 years ago, I guess 2 legislative sessions ago, they significantly changed the standards for physical restraint of students and making it much less frequent, harder to physically restrain students. And I think there was some feedback that some pretty appropriate actions were now constrained out by the policy. And so the legislature slightly changed things. They also made things, the big thing was more concrete by defining, I think, what physical injury is. If I recall correctly, serious physical injury was the standard. There had to be a risk of serious physical injury, but they didn't define what serious physical injury is. So it's just kind of the legislature cleaning up a change that they made. And Lisa has been through this, and anything you would add to that?
No.
So I would make a motion to adopt the revised version of policy JKAA as presented. So a second. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. IKF we postponed because we recognize that a second change is needed. We don't want to make Rachel have to put up a policy every week. So we'll come back to that one. JFAB. The state, a lot of these are coming out of, Meredith attending the Drummond and Woodson session on the state laws change that required policy changes. In particular, this is addressing students of military students students of military parents, which, so the change is all down at the bottom. And basically, it's kind of maximum flexibility for students of military parents. They can start at a school before their parents actually get here, are assigned at a base here and that kind of thing. So it's high flexibility for students of military parents. So I would make them, and this is a revision, I would make a motion to approve the revision to JFAB as presented.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Passes. I just noticed an error. We cut it down to 1, 2, 3, and then it says, oh no, points 3 and 4 in the previous section. Still apply. Yeah, so we're fine. Okay. Grants. Grant greater than $500 has to have board approval.
This one is, the amount of 2,000.
Surprise, it's just the Archer. She's just
Yeah,
a
there's not
tiger
paper
when
on it and everything.
no paper.
Yeah.
Just a tiger when it comes to getting grants, so that's noted and appreciated. Many of them supporting the school garden, and I guess it's from agriculture in the classroom. I would make a motion to approve or to accept the grant from agriculture in the classroom. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion or questions? The main concern is just to make sure it's not obligating us to do anything, and in this case, we're already running the garden, so all those in favor? Passes 4-0. Policy Subcommittee, you just saw our output. We'll be meeting, I guess it's in 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks and 2 days. UTC, Kevin is not here. Curriculum Subcommittee will be meeting in 3 weeks and 2 days. I guess anything you want to update from the last curriculum?
No, last curriculum meeting, we shared about the norms.
Right.
To get that group's input and feedback and help them get their heads around things. And then we also just updated the timeline for course proposals, so that those will be coming to the board earlier so that they can get in the high school handbooks earlier for kids.
Great. Anything on wellness?
We haven't met, but I think we're gonna do November 10th. The next meeting, that we said, yeah. So hopefully that works.
Okay. Maybe in the works. Strategic plan did meet since I think the last board meeting. We broke into groups based mostly around the strands and PD and tried to help give some feedback and sanity checking about the education, about the PD development that was going to happen on Friday. Anything either of you would add to that?
No, just that we're moving forward with the strand work and we will meet again together as a strategic team right around the time we have a meeting in November, this, like the same week of this board meeting in November. And I think our next date we're working on strands is December. Yeah.
November 3rd is the strategic plan.
Oh,
Leadership team.
It's on my calendar.
November 20th and then December 3rd. So
Yeah.
November 20th is the leadership team. And
Okay.
it's December 3rd.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? Any public comment? Don't see any. Our next meeting will be, well, maybe this is the time we should schedule our abbreviated board meeting to approve SREF applications. You said next Wednesday.
I think that feels like the optimal night for timing for that.
Yeah.
If we can have it, get a quorum
What's the
together.
date on that?
This 29th.
29.
I know Kevin just mentioned in an email that we were talking about negotiations meetings, that he has a class
Yes.
Yeah, I won't be.
Wednesday.
I mean, not that I want to exclude anybody, but we do only need a quorum of 3, unless people are gonna have strong. Be happy to distribute and pre-discuss the SREF applications if people have questions.
Are we looking at 6 o'clock? Is that,
I could do 6,
I could do
5.
anytime
I can't
after,
do 5.
I could do 5 or later.
I can do 6,
Way later, but
6 o'clock on the 29th.
or even theoretically 5:30, but 6 will probably be safe, so.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Now, are you able to make?
yeah, I mean, it'd have to be way later, it wouldn't make sense, like 7:30 or something, but I think if you just send stuff around.
Okay,
That will be the only item on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yes, we assume.
yeah, it should be a half-hour meeting.
Works for me.
Okay. So that will be our next meeting, 6 o'clock on the 29th. Special meeting, abbreviated agenda. And then our next regular board meeting is November 18th at 6 o'clock in the library and on Zoom. Any requests for information or follow-up? Okay, we do have an executive session. Our only vote after executive session will be adjournment, so people are welcome to cut out, but I would make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 40560 labor negotiations. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carries 4-0. We're in executive session. Thank you, everybody who's attending.
Thanks. You're in from your conference and I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, was your